It's Tabani here with another wake up call video, and today we're going to be talking about, does what is right and wrong change from generation to generation? And if you ask me off the street, if I'm walking and you just ask me, this question, I'd say yes, yes, it does. To, because to back up my statement, in life things change, nothing ever stays the same. That also includes morality, things us as people try to grapple with reality. But what is morality? The textbook definition of morality is a system of principles concerning right and wrong behavior that is accepted by a particular group of people. And with each generation, new social conditions and social changes occur, which means that today people do not perceive the world as they did 50 years ago, which is only natural because everything is always constantly changing on a daily basis, really. So if you look at a space of 50 years, there is a large and significant change in morality and how we see things and what we agree with. And rather, like 50 years ago, for example, rather few senile people would tolerate an unmarried couple living together. An unmarried couple living together, that would be seen as what? Several decades ago, it was moral for a woman to take care of her family. But now we live in a completely different world. Not every woman is for this. Taking care of the family and all that. They want to be doing stuff, and that's how it is these days. And in this our generation, in each generation is truly an entirely different world. Although it is possible to hear teenagers describing their older family members as modern and progressive people. But in a majority of families, a generation gap is still prevails, and we see how different our moral values are compared to our grandparents, and even most of our own parents as teenagers. As we move on to the values of each generation, we see that various aspects of life have changed. Romantic relationships are perhaps the most valid ones. Current liberal views look immoral to the elderly because in their time, propriety was a virtue. So basically saying that our generation does not have propriety. And now that, because we have looked at how different generations have different beliefs, but now we have to look at our own special generation. Because in our generation, what is right and wrong is a personal judgment. We see that on a daily basis. Not a social demand. It's not a social demand. These days it's become personal. It's what I think is right, and it's what I'm going to do because I think it's right. Whether it's on a test, during a sports game, or on a significant other, everyone knows that cheating is wrong. Yet plenty of people continue to do it because the definition of cheating has changed for them. We see it with a whole lot of guys doing this. They have twisted a lot of things to get what they want from women in these types of relationships. Don't want to get too in depth about that. That's a whole nother video. And this is because everything in our generation is subjective. That's thinking everything in our generation has become subjective. A good example is one from New York Times writer David Brooks. More about him here, where he reacted to a book called Lost in Transition, The Dark Side of Emerging Adulthood. That's the article he wrote, which claims that young adults in our society have difficulties responding to questions regarding morality. These young adults explain that moral choices are based on the individual, a claim with which I agree. Mr. Brooks doesn't approve of this change, as seen in his article, If It Feels Right. In this article, Mr. Brooks suggests that young people today aren't educated enough to form actual opinions about moral issues. Mr. Brooks believes people need to have clear-cut answers regardless of the situation, whereas young people prefer to go with what feels right in the moment, in the heat of the moment. If we don't usually use our heads. We just use what we think is right. Like, I think this is what I should be doing, and hence I will do it. In our generation, people are too quick to judge, although this has been a common trend in human history. Take the Roman Catholics in 300 AD, for example, who were very unwilling people. They accused women of science to be witches and started burning them in stakes alive, a very common practice in that era, which was very bad, and I'm glad we moved on from that. Mr. Brooks does not believe that our generation can properly understand questions of morality. I personally do not believe that young people lack the proper vocabulary to voice our thoughts and moral issues. I believe that we are more open-minded. We prefer to look at an individual's circumstances rather than make broad overall assumptions, because we don't want to judge too quickly. That's how we are. This generation is very accepting and has become very accepting of different people in different backgrounds. And once we sort of take over, things are going to be changed drastically, because we are so accepting of people. And the desire to be accepting is becoming too lenient. But today's world is changing at a rapid rate. It's hard to keep up sometimes. So many things are happening so quickly. It's so hard to keep up these days. More stress on our generation. Mr. Brooks stated that as our generation gets older, this method of individualizing moral decision making will fade out, and we'll see the bigger picture as we grow up. And I don't particularly disagree with that. But for now, it can be a trial and approach error for our generation. That's how we are. We are a trial and approach era. I see no problem with going with what feels right, because that's what helps us learn. It's part of the process of growing up. Every generation is going to be different, and ours has chosen to change the definition of morality. Older generations cannot enforce their will onto us. All we can do is learn from them and hope not make the mistakes they did. Although that is inevitable, because humans have been making the same mistakes. Wars, poverty, governments, it's a whole lot of things that I really agree that we keep making the same mistakes. But that is a topic for another day. So does what is right and wrong change from generation to generation? Yes, it does, indeed, most definitely. And it will continue changing. We just have a lot to learn. As in my generation, we have a lot to learn, we have a lot of growing up to do, and that will be